I call the member for Greenway.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, when it comes to the failures of this government to respect proper standards and accountability, the Prime Minister's track record in the NBN is a pearler. It's an absolute pearler. In 2013, this Prime Minister stood up with the then Prime Minister, looked the Australian people in the eye and said they would deliver a national broadband network for $29 billion and have it finished by 2016. He declared it would be open, it would be transparent. But then the first test came, the December 2013 strategic review. And in this report, it was revealed that the Prime Minister's multi-technology mix for the NBN had blown out from $29 billion to $41 billion. Did he offer any explanation, as to how the high cost of the NBN had become even $12 billion more expensive overnight? Any explanation as to now why it would not be delivered until 2020? No explanation whatsoever, Mr Deputy Speaker. And worse still, if you want to talk about proper standards and accountability, every key assumption in the 2013 strategic review remains redacted and blacked out. Redacted and blacked out. So much for the transparency promised by this Prime Minister. And even to this day, this government refuses to release that information. And then we saw information emerge about further cost blowouts and delays and failures in the rollout with this Prime Minister's multi-technology mix, the rollout that was supposed to be faster, sooner and more affordable. And here's some of the things that we learned. We started to learn about secret trials, where the NBN had reduced the cost and time to deploy fibre. We began to hear about how the cost of fibre to the node, how this Prime Minister's copper NBN, its cost was blowing out even further. We heard about how the cost of copper remediation had blown out by more than 1,000%. We learnt that the HFC network, which the Prime Minister touted as a game-changer, was actually not fit for purpose. And now, did we see any transparency and accountability as a result of that? No, I'll tell you what we saw, Mr Deputy Speaker. We saw a raid. We saw an unprecedented AFP raid in the middle of an election campaign. In the middle of an election campaign in Australia in 2016. We had the NBN chairman then publish a most politically charged opinion piece about that raid, defending the NBN's actions. Bear in mind that this is the hand-picked chairman of the NBN, hand-picked by this Prime Minister. And this was despite advice from the nation's top public servant, saying that doing so would breach caretaker conventions. And just to quote from an article at the time, NBN chairman Ziggy Switkowski willfully breached caretaker conventions during an election campaign and did so against the express advice of the nation's top public servant. Mr Deputy Speaker, we see the full extent of these failures again revealed in the August 2015 corporate plan, where the NBN again blew out in costs from $41 billion to up to $56 billion. But no, did we get more transparency? We had scrapped external oversight of the NBN corporate plan. So we have a project personally undertaken by this Prime Minister, who is so invested in it, the one in which he declared we would have full transparency and openness. We have seen nothing but. This born-to-rule Prime Minister, who fancies himself as a genius, has been exposed on every front when it comes to the NBN. He has lurched from failure to failure. He was a failure as Communications Prime Minister. He is a failure as Prime Minister. He stuffed up the national broadband network. Just look at the evidence. We dropped from 30th in the world for internet speeds to 50th, a 160% increase in complaints about the NBN from consumers. We are now placed last out of 28 countries in the world for broadband satisfaction. Last in the world. This great Liberal hope, this champion of copper, he coveted the Prime Ministership his entire life, exposed as nothing more than shallow and glass-jawed, and in the immortal words of Paul Keating, you light him up there's a bit of fizz, but then nothing. Nothing.
The member's time has expired.